Hi, sixth graders. We're on lesson 7.3, which is percent and estimation. So label your page on the top with 7.3. And then our learning target is being able to estimate percents by using fractions and decimals. So sometimes it's important to understand how much a percentage is of a number and being able to estimate about how much that would be. So in the example, in a recent year, quarterback Carson Palmer completed 62% of his passes. He threw 520 passes. About how many did he complete? So we can see that we're trying to figure out 62% of 520, which we know 62% is close to 60%. So 60% of 520, we know that 60% is the same as 3/5, because 60 100ths simplifies down to 3/5, and then we multiply that times 520, and we get approximately 312. So we are able to do that without needing to use our calculator or without even needing to change it to a decimal. So if we want to estimate 42% of 120, we know that 42% is really close to 40%. So we're going to change and we're going to find 40% of 120. And we know that 40% is 40 100ths, which can be simplified down to 4/10, which can be simplified down then to 2/5. And then remember, 40% of 120 would be the same as multiplying it times 120. So 2/5 times 120. Oops, I don't know why I'm doing a 4. And then when we multiply by a whole number, we want to add that 1. So 2 times 120 is 240. And then we have 240 fifths, because 2 times 120 is 240, 5 times 1 is 5, and then that equals 48. So 42% of 120 is approximately 48. Marita decides to leave a 20% tip on a restaurant bill of $14.72. About how much money should she tip the restaurant server? So we need to estimate 20% of $14.72. So we know that $14.72 is really close to $15. So we're going to change that to $15. And we also know that we can write 20% as, remember, 20% is 20 over 100, which is 2/10, which simplifies down to 1/5. So then when we convert it to 15, then we know that 1/5 times $15 converts very nicely. So 1 times $15 is 15, and then 5 times, so it would be $15 over 1, 5 times 1, so $15 divided by 5 would be $3. So approximately $3 is what she should tip the server. So that's using a fraction to estimate. We can also use 10% of a number to estimate too. So what we would do is we would find 10% of $14.72. But again, if we change it up to $15, because it's pretty close, then we know that 10% is the same as 0.1. 0.1 times $15 is $1.50. 10% of any number, you just take the decimal and you move it to the left 1. So it brings it to $1.50. 20% is 10% times 2. So 20% of 15 then would be 2 times 10% of 15. This is 10% right here. Okay, because it's pretty easy again to find 10% because we just move the decimal, and then we can multiply that by 2, which is $3. So 2 different ways that you can estimate fractions. So this is what we just were talking about. Another method for estimating the percent is first find 10% and then multiply. So 70% would be 7 times 10%. So basically your 70% of a number equals 7 times 10% of the number. So let's do another one using that one. Dante plans to put 80% of his paycheck into a savings account. His paycheck this week was $295. About how much money will he put into his savings account? So if it's a multiple of 10, then it's best to do the this 10% and then multiplying it. If it's really close, like if this was 79 or 81 or something like that, then for sure you can always round down or up to a multiple of 10 as well. So I know that 10% of 295 would exactly be 29.5 because I'm just moving the decimal over to the left one. 10%, we'll do a quick little 10% lesson. 10% of 35 would be 3.5. Or if it's $35, then it'd be $3.50. 10% of 200 would be 20. 10% of 5 would be 0.5. See how our decimal, always that invisible decimal starts, so we move it over 1. Move it over 1, move it over 1, add a decimal and a 0. Okay? So 10% of 295, we're just moving it over to the left one, 29.5. 29.5 is approximately 30. So 10%, or sorry, we already found 10%. So 10% of 295 is approximately 30. And then we need to multiply that by 8 because 10% times 8 would be 80%. So times 8. So 30 times 8, 3 times 8 is 24, and then we add our 0 because it's 30 in that ones place. So it's $240. So he will put away about $240. If we want to estimate a percent greater than 1, so if we want to estimate 122% of 50, well, 122% is about 120%. So we're looking for numbers that we easily can change into fractions or decimals. 120% of 50 then, and you can see if we take 100% of 50 and add it to 20% of 50. So 100% plus 20% is 120. We're just breaking that up because it's easy for us to find 100%. And then we could also pretty easily find 20%. So 100%, if we change it to a decimal, is just 1, or 100% of anything is just that number. 20% of 50, so 20% is 1/5, because 20% is 20 over 100, and then we can simplify it down to 1/5. 1/5 times 50, so 1 times 50 is 50, divided by 5 times 1, which is 50/5. 50 divided by 5 is 10. So that part is 10. So then it shows down here anyways, 50, or 1 times 50, which is just 50, plus 10, and we get about 60. So 174% of 200. So we can do the exact same way. We can go 100% of 200 plus 74% is really close to 75%. So 75% of 200. So I know that 100% of 200 is 200. And then I know that 75% of 200, so 75% we can write as 3/4, and then multiply it by 200. And I can actually cross cancel 200 divided by 4. So if we divide 200 and 4 both by 4, we get 4 divided by 4 is 1. 200 divided by 4 is 50. 50 times 3 equals 150 over 1, which is just 150. So then we have 200 plus 150, which equals 350. So 174% of 200 is approximately 350. And again, if it's a percent over 100, it's a number greater than that number that you're taking the percent of. And then we have 298% of 45. So pause me and solve this one. So 298%, you could do 200%. We'll do it a couple different ways. 200% of 45 plus, and then we have 98%, which is very close to 100. So we're just going to take 100% of 45. 200% is the same as 2 because we move that decimal over, so it's basically 2 times 45. I also know that 100% of a number is that number, so 200% would be that number times 2. So 45 times 2 is 90, and then 100% of 45 is 45. So then 90 plus 45 would be approximately 130. Also, 298% is really close to 300. So if I took 300% of 45 and then I changed 300% to just 3. So if I did 3 times 45, I would get not 130, I would get, I knew that didn't seem right, 135. 3 times 45 would be 135, approximately. All right. If you need to go back and review, make sure you rewatch and do so. Otherwise, log on to NICU and take your 7-3 NICU quiz. Have a super evening.